Come all you jolly Shanty boys that put the shanty and go.
One can ride through the heart of the pine country and see miles of stumps. The large operators have gone out of business or have shifted the scene of their operations to the forest of the southern states or the Pacific Northwest.
After 50 years of logging, the green forests that had put so much wealth into the lumber barons' pockets were nearly gone. What had once been so plentiful in Michigan was finally coming to an end.
The lumbering and logging industry declined in Michigan primarily because lumbering and logging was based on an inexhaustible resource. And once the trees are gone, of course the industry itself has to subsist on trees imported from someplace else or simply has to move on. And it was customary, of course, in the 19th century, and it was a fact of life, that once the trees were gone, the lumbermen would pack up their machinery and move further west. They had come from New York, Pennsylvania, moved on to Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, and by the late 19th century, they were making the big move across the middle border states to the far west. By 1900, out of the 130 mills along the Saginaw River, there were only 35 left in the Saginaw area.
By the mid-1880s, the lumber in the Saginaw Valley was pretty much exhausted, and in order to keep the mills in operation, timber was imported from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and Canada. And when Canada stopped its shipments in 1894, well, that pretty much signaled the official end of the lumbering era.
It was characteristic of the lumber business, as many businesses in the 19th century, to simply move on when the resources were exhausted. By 1885, when the trees in the lower peninsula were gone, many of the lumber barons began to move to other areas of the country. Most of them moved westward to Wisconsin, Minnesota, and even by the late century they were beginning to move to the far west, Oregon, Idaho, and Washington. It was a transient business in itself. A lot of the robber barons simply had no commitment or community responsibility. They were here to cut as much as they could, as rapidly as they could, and move on. And even the workers anticipated that they would be transient, that they would be here for a period of time and then move on.
One by one, the sawmills went silent. They closed their doors. The workers lost their jobs. And as they went out of business, many mills were consumed by fire. Speculation was that the owners set their buildings ablaze as the lumbering business came to an end.
While arsons did occur in the sawmills, they were not necessarily widespread, but nonetheless they were a convenient method of moving on in record keeping. By the late 19th century, we began to accuse some of the lumber barons of being robber barons, and rather than expose their records, it was easier simply to burn them up. In one short period of time of about 3 years, 13 mills along the Saginaw River burned. And no doubt the lumber barons were burning these mills directly or indirectly and collecting the insurance. In 1890, the insurance companies began to investigate and stop payment, and all of a sudden the arson ceased.
When the trees were all gone, the Shanty boys went looking for new jobs in the Upper Peninsula, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. And the lumber barons, well, they headed west to Oregon and Washington to stake their claim on new stands of timber.
The lumbermen acquired their land cheaply, but they were after the standing timber on top of it. They didn't care about the land themselves. So once the lumber was gone, it was no problem for many of them to let the land revert back to the state for taxes. Fortunately for us, that allowed a very strong agricultural industry and a state park system to arise after a lot of work was done to make sure that stump land became viable land again.
Before the barren land could be used by the farmers, all the stumps had to be removed. This was a long process that sometimes produced little or no crops off the land. The state of Michigan had to find some new uses for the land. Bay City and Saginaw were looking for some new industries so that they could survive. Bay City was able to chart its economic future by diversifying its industries.
When the lumber industry left, it created a huge economic void in Bay City. By 1905, the city had already started filling that void. That was the year that shipbuilder Harry J. Defoe started Defoe Boat and Motor Works, which turned into Defoe Shipbuilding Company. And a few years later, the Sovereign Brothers started the Ready Cut Homes Company, which became one of the biggest sellers of catalog homes in the U.S. And we also saw growth in some of the industries like industrial works, Bay City shovels, and even looking forward into producing auto parts for a world market.
Eventually, Saginaw moved from sawmills to industrial machinery as they made the move to an economy based on the horseless carriage.
The Jaycox Steering Gear Company, founded by Jackson Church and Wilcox, was one of the first automotive parts supply companies in Saginaw. They supplied steering gear parts to many of the major manufacturers that were building automobiles at that time. One of them was Buick. Buick eventually acquired the Jaycox Company before becoming incorporated into what is now General Motors.
Without such a strong dependence on lumber, Midland was able to avoid the problems faced by Bay City and Saginaw. Midland's future was about to be carried forward by a new industry, pump from brine wells.
The late 1890s was a time of great change and difficulty for Midlanders. The lumber industry had pretty much bottomed out, and it was a time of people leaving their town to try to find opportunities elsewhere. It's also a time when a 24-year-old Herbert Dow came to Midland to use the natural resources below the ground, not on top of it. The 20th century and Dow Chemical Company brought a new prosperity to Midland that had never been here in the 1890s.
White pine is what brought settlers to the Saginaw Valley during the lumbering era, making these the glory days certainly worth remembering.
Why we should remember the lumbering and logging heritage in the Saginaw Valley is because while many of the lumber barons perhaps left, a good many stayed and left us with an entrepreneurial spirit that carried over into the next era, and that was the automobile era. The competition, the intense drive, the skilled and unskilled laborers, the capital that was available, all set the stage for the profitability of the automobile industry. And when you think about it, even though we're struggling today with the automobile industry as a spin-off industry of the lumber industry gave this area 100 years of prosperity. And really, we can't regret that.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And make sure to click that bell icon to stay notified when we upload new content. Videos like this are only possible because of viewers like you. To help support this channel, click on the link in the description below. We'll see you next time.